Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Maria Espinoza. Maria Espinoza is the National Director of the Remembrance Project, which honors and remembers Americans and legal residents who have been killed by illegal aliens. Maria, welcome to Conduit News.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Will you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the National Director of the Remembrance Project?
Right. Well, my background starts here in Texas when, my father was born in Mexico and came here the right way. We all encourage these nationals to do, and not sneak it in the back door. And my husband Tim Ling and I started the Remembrance Project in 2009 here in Houston, Texas, after seeing an report, of Officer Henry Canales, who was shot and killed by an illegal alien during the sting operation. And within that report, they also mentioned that there was another police officer who had been killed by another illegal alien, shot 4 or 5 times in the back of the head, and his name was Rodney Johnson. You might recall his name. Officer Johnson's widow filed a lawsuit against the city, and that's what intrigued me. I'm a former legal assistant, and I thought what warranted a lawsuit when there was an in-line of duty death, as tragic as it is, Paul, there was something that went wrong in this case, and that's where we learned about sanctuary city policies. We had never heard of them before. I took it, very personal in the fact that illegal aliens were basically untouchable. Laws are for citizens, apparently, only, and that the city of Houston is protecting illegal aliens. So we went to work and talked to elected officials. First of all, they denied this sanctuary city policy even existed, and denied that illegal aliens, that many, were here. But through our research, my husband, Tim Ling, researched Texas killings by illegal aliens. Of course, they call them immigrants. So you have to get that right in your search. He expanded his search to the other states and found that there was an epidemic of killings by illegal aliens. So, we approached the elected officials with our information, denied it, lied to us, and then, eventually really just shutting us out. So we created the Stolen Lives Quilt. This is a visual memorial to the victims killed in all preventable killings, Paul. So here we are, found ourselves right in the middle of a very hot topic, and Donald Trump, when he first announced, reached out to us and wanted to highlight the cases, and we said absolutely. He's the only person who has ever embraced the Remembrance Project and the angel families, and said that he was going to do something about it. And he is trying. He created the Office of Voice, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement, last year. We just celebrated the 1-year anniversary as a promise to the Remembrance Project that he would do more for the families.
Yeah, I remember him making that announcement. I thought that was a really bold move. He does a great job when it comes to, just like any president can do, using the bully pulpit to bring to the attention of the American people issues that a lot of us don't know about. And this is something that has been overlooked. I think, though, when you look at the international backdrop right now, you look at the immigration issues that are going on in Europe, and you look at what's happening, and when it comes to the increase in crime there, the increase in killings, the increase in sexual assault, and yet, here in the United States, this has been happening in the United States a lot longer than this, migration situation, that's been going on in Europe. Well, within reason, obviously, the London that they've been having that go on for a while as well. So, how do we get the news out there even more, Maria? What are your thoughts on that?
We keep talking. That's why, I'm had over probably 300 interviews since the first of the year, and we just keep talking about it and, sharing the information and making people listen.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. As many of you take your first sips of coffee this morning, I have had way more than you. Let me promise you that. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. You have found it. You are listening to it. We're so glad that you're with us. You can sound off on the program or about the program by giving us a text message, or you could give us a phone call, 870-275-9799. Also over on Facebook.com/Conduit News or our YouTube page, Conduit News. Be sure to subscribe and click the little bell to receive notifications. We got a great show for you. Going to get some national news and also the point that I've been making on China and their investment, quote, really it's Arkansas's investment in some of these companies. It just keeps coming to the forefront. It just keeps coming up, whether it's the CIA, the FBI saying that, we have China as a belligerent actor, whatever. I'm going to get to that again, but it just keeps coming up. I can't get away from it. It's not contrived or anything. It just keeps coming up in the news, and there's some interesting questions that I think we as Arkansans have got to ask. Really specifically, we've got to ask the people in power why they're pursuing these types of deals. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Also, let's see here. Arkansas teacher retirement system. You know how the director, there was one call for his resignation, had to do with a $300 million class action lawsuit win, $75 million went to a law firm, $4.1 million went to another law firm as a referral fee. A lot of questions surrounding the Arkansas teacher retirement system head, the director there, George Hopkins. Well, now he's having to amend his expense reports. His statement of financial interest. He's having to amend that. We'll tell you about that. We have a judge that has now rejected an injunction on the issue 1, the bad tort reform that we're all going to have to be voting on this coming November. New article up at conduitforaction.org. Headline, Legislature abdicates its budget responsibility. We'll tell you about that. Also, later this month, this is August 1st, later this month, the Satanic Temple is planning on bringing that Baphomet statue to the Arkansas Capitol in an organized protest. That is going to be extremely controversial. Also, we have, did you know that the state tries to regulate midwives? If you choose to have a midwife, if your family, your wife chooses to have a midwife during pregnancy, during birth, the state regulates them. I had no idea. There's new rules out there that are getting mixed reactions, and it really does put the cradle in cradle to grave, if you know what I'm saying. At the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking with Mr. John Calvin Martin. Mr. John Calvin Martin will be with us from the Patriots of Act 746. The bottom of the next hour, we have Mike Landry, who is a Washington County Republican committeeman, and he will be talking about how he first heard of the changes to the Republican Party platform last year and how they changed it back and put the principles of limited government and God back into the party platform. We have all of that today, but let's get started with this headline. Breitbart.com. You know, this is kind of a follow-up to the segment that we did yesterday on the program. Headline, McConnell declares tentative support for Trump's border wall. So yesterday we were lamenting how slow to action Washington, D.C. is, considering the one thing everybody was crystal clear about during the Trump campaign for president was that he wanted to build a wall and that the people wanted him to build the wall. Boy, there was a rally last night, and you could just hear people saying, build that wall, packed arena. It's the one thing that they said they were going to do, and yet you have Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, according to reports, where they were just saying, we're not going to do this. It's probably not going to happen. The quote was from Mitch McConnell, probably not. Well, now we have this headline that McConnell has declared tentative support for Trump's border wall. Quote, I support what the president is trying to do on the wall. Most of my members do as well. We're going to continue to discuss it with him and hope that this process can achieve what he would like to achieve on the wall and also get these appropriation bills signed into law, which is quite different than what's happened in the past. Okay, something tells me we need to be listening very closely at something called carefully crafted language. We need to be listening, and maybe not today, but pretty soon, someday. This will be interesting, and I think it's because they know the people are outraged. Their members know that the people back home are outraged. When you start to, well, let me just say, there's been a lot of criticism at the Koch brothers in the last week. The president, we ended the program yesterday giving you those tweets from the president saying, listen, these are the Charles and David Koch. They're nice guys. They got bad ideas. I don't need their money. I think that they're more globalists, is what he said, and we're going to continue to do things. We need to have strong borders, and we need to continue to try to push back on some of these bad trade deals and everything else. But we will see. You got the Democrats in this same article. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the comic book villain, criticized the president's determination to force a decision at all costs, even if that includes a government shutdown. Usually, the person that loses the shutdown is the person who caused it, and Donald Trump is making no bones about it. He said that he might think of causing it. Can we just drop this nonsense about? The one thing is, I don't think people care as much. Do you remember before Donald Trump, everybody was always paranoid about a government shutdown and who was going to get the blame? Well, we all know who the media blames. They always blame Republicans. They blame Republicans when they don't have the White House. They blame Republicans when they do have the White House. Can we just get over the fact that the mainstream media is going to mislead the people? The mainstream media doesn't like Republicans unless they can get a Republican on their news show criticizing other Republicans. Like they did with Governor Hutchinson when he would go on MSNBC to criticize Donald Trump's plan. It was a fence-straddling criticism, but, when we were trying to repeal Obamacare. And that's the only time the mainstream media likes Republicans, is when the bigger government Republicans come on and criticize the other Republicans that are actually trying to do something to change the status quo, to shake things up. Anyway, this whole thing about, who's going to get the blame for the government shutdown, who cares at this point? Who cares? I mean, you're never going to satisfy these people who claim to be the arbiters of truth, these mainstream media elites. You're never going to satisfy them. They've been taught in their journalism schools on a chalkboard that we should all give up our money, put it into one big pot, and divide it up equally, and everything's going to be fine, and humankind is going to be perfected. You have to realize who you're dealing with here. These people these people believe in socialism. I mean, that's what their goal is. Anyway, what they really believe is really a class of elites and an oligarchy, and we're too stupid to govern ourselves. That's really what they believe, and that's not chalkboard socialism either. Okay, so I kind of got obsessed yesterday. If you were listening to the program this time yesterday, I got obsessed with Lou Dobbs. I was telling you that Lou Dobbs, when he had his CNN show, now, of course, he's got his Fox show, but when he had a CNN show, it was the best thing that has ever probably been on CNN. And he was, every single night, he was talking about illegal immigration, talking about the crisis at the border, and he was bringing attention to it like I've never seen anyone bring attention to one issue. And now look where we are. And he had his pulse. Lou Dobbs had his pulse on America. And I just kind of, I never realized it until now. I mean, think about this. Lou Dobbs was covering this stuff when it was an issue. We were outraged as conservatives. Our sovereignty is being violated. It's one of the most violent places on the face of the planet in parts of the southern border. But he just kept on. And specifically, he would talk about what this was doing to the American worker, the wages, everything else. And now all of that is so mainstream and everybody's talking about it. Specifically, though, Lou Dobbs has now been criticizing the Koch brothers and what they're trying to accomplish, trying to put pressure on members of the Republican Party to say you've got to stop Trump's agenda when it comes to the wall, and you've got to stop Trump's agenda when it comes to these tariffs because they own steel plants outside of the country. So I was scrolling on Facebook yesterday because he was on Tucker Carlson 2 nights ago, but yesterday I was scrolling on Facebook and I was kind of doing, some Facebook stalking of Lou Dobbs, and I saw that he made an additional appearance on Charles Payne's show, which is, what is it, Making Money? Yeah, Making Money with Charles Payne. Lou Dobbs lays into the Koch brothers again and says this. Take a listen.
It's important for everybody to understand this. The Koch brothers just flew their true colors. These are not Republicans, they're not conservatives, and they're not just anti-Trump. They are anti-American worker. Because you can't have the most liberal immigration policies in the world, welcome illegal immigrants by the hundreds of thousands across your border without destroying the American worker, without destroying American business and the middle class of this country. Charles Koch put every American family on notice. It's his damn way or it's no way, as far as he's concerned. He's not declaring war against Trump. He's declaring war against the middle class and the American family.
Well, he's got plenty of company. I mean, all of a sudden, the soybean issue, which was an economic issue per se, now being used, it's on the cover of the USA Today. And I said this on Friday, it was going to happen.
Back it up a little bit. Back it up a little bit. I want to hear what Charles Payne just said there. Is it, first of all, Arkansans, it is fascinating that the entire country now is wanting to report on soybeans, right? Can we take a moment? We've arrived. We have these national talking heads, and they're now talking about soybeans. They're very interested in soybeans and what's going to happen with soybeans. Okay, listen, back it up because this is interesting. Lou Dobbs putting some numbers in perspective here. Listen.
War against Trump. He's declaring war against the middle class and the American family.
Well, he's got plenty of company. I mean, all of a sudden, the soybean issue, which was an economic issue per se, now being used, it's on the cover of the USA Today. And I said this on Friday, it was going to happen. Soybeans weigh in midterm elections.
This is how ridiculous. If we could show this is how ridiculous mainstream reporting is on soybeans. Can I put it in some perspective?
Sure.
We export, it's our largest export, period. It is $20 billion a year. That's $40 billion because it's half of everything the farmers grow is exported. The Chinese are stealing $600 billion of intellectual property. You won't see those two numbers next to each other talking about China, which is what started all of this, at all. It is a ridiculous proposition. Third grade math would solve this for a lot of general assignment and political reporters who need an education in basic numbers. Because without it, there's no perspective. The president is right. He's right as rain, and he is the only person with the guts to take this issue on because the Koch brothers, the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, and Wall Street are perfectly willing to keep this country a debtor nation in perpetuity,
right, and he goes on to say whether we're talking about the trade deficit or the national debt. Okay, so Lou Dobbs, man, I really am a big fan of Lou Dobbs. So those two numbers. So he's talking about $40 billion or the $20 billion versus the $600 billion a year, that figure of intellectual property theft by the Chinese. Now, I've got to remind you that we have reports over the last 3 weeks. First, you had the FBI come out and say that they have investigations in all 50 states into the economic activity of the Chinese. Then you had the CIA saying at that same conference, saying the same thing, that they're trying to supplant the United States. And militarily, they are certainly, we talk about meddling. That word doesn't even begin to describe what they're doing in the South China Sea. So the question is, in this new world where there is a legitimate political force that's more nationalistic than there ever has been, that's certainly coming back in Europe in a big way as well, but obviously it's coming back here in terms of we just would like the country to do the bare minimum of what it's supposed to do, like secure our borders, have a strong national defense, not be taken advantage of in trade deals, everything else. It's interesting that here in Arkansas, we have inked these deals with 4 Chinese companies, and we're giving them our taxpayer money, trying to lure them here. Here's a 2017 article. Now, I know that Governor Asa Hutchinson has said he's met with Trump's trade advisors and that these Chinese investments are not inconsistent with the Make America Great Again agenda. And again, I'm sure the governor hopes that is true. Here is an op-ed by Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson on CNBC back on July 11th, 2017. Why China is bringing its companies and new jobs to Arkansas. Subheadlines. 4 recent deals with Chinese companies total $1.4 billion in investment and roughly 1,500 jobs. Now, this is a raw article. It's written by the governor himself. But let's actually go over, if you scroll down, we can go over these specific deals. You have the Shandong Rui Technology Company, made a deal with them. That's supposed to go in Forest City. You have Sun Paper. That's supposed to go down in Clark County. You have Tiawan Garments. That's supposed to happen in Little Rock. And then you have the Pet One Pet Products, supposed to happen in Danville. These 4 companies' investment in the state will total more than $1.4 billion. So here's the question, honest question, and I've said this a bunch. I disagree with Asa Hutchinson's economic development strategy. I don't believe the government should be picking winners and losers by, giving private companies this money. I think it's corporate welfare. I'm opposed to corporate welfare. I would rather you lower the corporate tax, eliminate the corporate tax altogether, treat everybody the same. That's my philosophy. But if you're going to do it, why China? And that's got to be the question at this point to the governor. Why? Why would a governor, think about this, why would a governor of any state in America court Chinese businesses to come to their state, offering tax incentives and, whatever, when we know that China is a belligerent economic actor seeking to supplant the United States as the global economic superpower? That is question number 1. Why would you be courting those businesses when we know that is the case? All right? That's number 1. We also know that China is stealing intellectual property from the United States as much as they possibly can. We know they cheat on trade deals. We know they float their currency. We know that they're a member of the World Trade Organization, but they don't quite follow the rules. They really manipulate, they benefit from being labeled a developing nation when they invest billions. Now think about this. They're labeled a developing nation, China is, and yet they can invest billions outside their own economy in a state like Arkansas. Also, we know that their economic moves are a precursor to their military expeditionary desires to position them as the military superpower on the planet. So how is it good for Arkansas to invite them into our country, into our state? I think the governor needs to start answering, or somebody needs to ask this question, get a response out of him, because it's an honest question at this point. If we're going to be all outraged at Russia when Russia's economy is much, much less of a threat to us than China's, why would we be doing this? It's a very, very interesting question. It needs to be answered. Also, I would remind you that as far as soybeans go, China has to have them. They have to have our soybeans, so they're going to buy them, whether or not they cave or whether or not they buy them through some third-party country. We've got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Maria Espinoza. Maria Espinoza is the national director of the Remembrance Project, which honors and remembers Americans and legal residents who have been killed by illegal aliens. Maria, welcome to Conduit News.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Will you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the national director of the Remembrance Project?
Right. Well, my background starts here in Texas when my father was born in Mexico and came here the right way. We all encourage these nationals to do, and not sneak it in the back door. And, my husband, Tim Lee, and I started the Remembrance Project in 2009 here in Houston, Texas.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so again, it's you gotta ask that question. It is a reasonable question to ask. Some people on Facebook are being pretty brutal. Randy on Facebook writes, China's working their plan and Asa is colluding with China. Whoa, we got the collusion alert. Collusion alert. Yeah, and Gene on Facebook writes, the Chinese Communist government burns Christian churches and arrests pastors, while about half of the Russians are Christians. I mean, that's a good point as well. They certainly will tear down churches, destroy churches. I got to think about who we're doing business with. Anyway, we're going to be right back with Patriots of Act 746's John Calvin Martin. I want to introduce you to him. And we're going to have an interesting talk about rights versus privileges when we come back. Don't go anywhere. longer than this, migration situation, that's been going on in Europe. Well, within reason. Obviously, the London that they've been having that go on for a while as well. So, how do we get, the news out there even more, Maria? What are your thoughts on that?
We keep talking. That's why, I'm had over probably 300 interviews since the first of the year, and we just keep talking about it and, sharing the information and making people listen, because this is the only way we're going to be able to educate the masses. As you know, President Trump is up against the fake news. They don't give us, any time and absolutely no ink, and if they do, it's very edited, and we're out to be the villains. And here are, tens of thousands of Americans being killed and permanently separated from their loved ones. But where is the outcry for our families right here on our own soil? I believe there was the Breitbart article where there were 129, I believe. I'm a little bit foggy. I'm getting over a cold, Paul. Versus one story about Americans killed by illegal aliens compared to the many, many stories of the illegal alien and what's going on with them. They have these stories and separation of children, and here our children are permanently separated from our loved ones. And yet, remember that if an American breaks the law, they get charged and convicted, they go to jail. And whether they have a child at home or not. So it's okay to separate Americans from their families, but it's not okay to separate illegal aliens who, number one, put themselves in that situation knowingly, and then, of course, the outcry is for them. It's completely backwards right now.
Yeah, it really seems you can see their long game kind of coming to fruition here when it comes to how they've changed the definitions of words. It used to be illegal alien, then it was illegal immigrant, now it's undocumented immigrant. And so this concept, Maria, that what they've done here is they're basically saying that it's not a crime. So, it's obvious that if I'm driving with my daughter and I do something in the car that's illegal and I need to be taken to jail, it's obvious my daughter's not going to come with me to jail. They're going to separate us, right? Because it's a crime.
Absolutely.
So they've they're trying to win this battle of words, redefining what things mean. And so what they're saying is, you know what? It's not a crime to come here illegally.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Patriots of Act 746 are on a mission to educate the people of Arkansas about your Second Amendment rights, specifically your gun rights here in Arkansas, your Arkansas constitutional rights when it comes to the Second Amendment, specifically constitutional carry, the concept of permitless carry as well. And you can check them out on Facebook. Go to facebook.com, search for Patriots of Act 746, and ask to be a member of the group. Join the online sensation today. Here to talk more about this growing group, Patriots of Act 746, we have Mr. John Calvin Martin with us. John, welcome to the program.
Good morning, my friend.
I really appreciate we had a conversation earlier or yesterday, and so I really appreciate getting to know you. I appreciate that you're willing to come on the program. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your interactions with the Patriots of Act 746 and how you first became aware of this organization.
Yes, sir. I guess my first interaction through them was knowing the Jan Morgan platform when she was running for governor. I got introduced to several of the Patriot members then and just absolutely fell in love with them because they were just down-to-earth, normal people. You know, a lot of times when we hear about these Facebook groups, we think they're radicals or extremists or whatever, and these Patriots of Act 746 guys are just good American, red-blooded American people. And, man, I just fell in love with those guys because they have the same kind of mindset that I do. You know, I just love my country. I want my country back. I want it to be what it was when I was growing up. And unfortunately, my kids don't know the America that I know, or that I knew growing up, you know.
Specifically, John, though, were you aware of the decriminalization of firearms in the state of Arkansas according to what the law says before you ran into the Patriots group?
No, sir. And that's the thing that really, if I can say, embarrassed me as much, because I've always considered myself a patriot, American, you know, red-blooded again. As I said, I love the flag and everything America stands for, or used to stand for. And so when I ran into these Patriots of Act 746 members, I was blown away on my own ignorance. I didn't realize that I had been duped, if I could put it that way, because growing up through the educational system and listening to the news, the mainstream media, I just took it for granted that my government was taking care of me, when actually that's not the case at all. And the more you study, when you start looking into the Constitution, you realize, whoa, we are far from where we ought to be as far as what our founding fathers wanted us to be. You know, and that's one of the things I love about the chapter that I'm a part of here, Southeast Arkansas. We've got chapters all over the state, so they're easy to get to, and just good, normal. Let me stress that, normal people. You know.
Well, tell us, John, about the Southeast Arkansas chapter and what you guys are hoping to accomplish.
Well, we're down here in the southeast corner of the state, and again, we're kind of feeling a cutoff down here because we're not as connected with Little Rock as we would like to be, and sometimes we feel there's a mentality down here that you kind of get cut off, and so we're trying to educate this part of the country on our constitutional rights, specifically the Second Amendment and constitutional carry, because Arkansas is a constitutional carry state, and so we're pushing nothing crazy or radical, but our normal rights. And unfortunately, Paul, you know, a lot of times we get the word rights and the word privileges confused. We think they're the same, and they are by no means the same. My right to protect my family is not a privilege. That is a God-given, inalienable right, and I have that right whether anybody likes it or not. And again, not to infringe on anyone else's rights, but when someone comes in to harm my family or my property, then I have the right to defend that. And again, that's a God-given right.
I appreciate what you said about how you kind of felt like you had been misled by the media when it comes to the Second Amendment and the rights that you have here in Arkansas now. It does seem that we've been conditioned to treat the Second Amendment different than we treat a lot of the other rights that we have. Let's just take the Fourth Amendment, to be secure in your papers, your property. You don't have to have a license to have a right to privacy, but yet we think that you have to have a license to own a firearm or to keep a firearm. And the left wants to take it much further than that. But, the idea that if you want to conceal carry, you have to have a permission slip. But right now, the Attorney General had an opinion that was very, very flawed, but she admitted in the first sentence, she said, there is no penalty in the law. There's no penalty in the law for carrying a concealed handgun without a permit. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly right. I think, and again, it's the way, we were raised and the little subtle things that we've been taught that if someone carries open or concealed in Arkansas, that they must be a radical. They must be somebody that's an extremist, when actually that's just being an American. That's just being an Arkansasian now, because that's our right. And again, in my thinking, if you start breaking down, I've done a little bit of studying on this, the difference in a privilege and a right, and actually that argument goes back into the 1700s. So it is actually, that's one of the arguments that our country was founded on.
Really?
Is it a right or is it a privilege? A privilege, by Webster's definition, is a certain entitlement to immunity granted by the state or another authority to a restricted group. Well, that in itself doesn't make sense to me. And by contrast, a right is an inherent, irrevocable entitlement held by all citizens of all human beings. So a right is something everybody has. Well, I have a right to protect myself.
Well, so that would contradict. I mean, the governor has said that he's called it a Second Amendment privilege before, and then it's reported that he said rights and privileges. It's the same thing. It's a synonym, basically.
Right. And they're 180 degrees apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you think of the fact that a right applies to everybody, well, specifically in the context of the Second Amendment, they're looking at it like it is a privilege because you've got to check in with the government in order to be able to exercise this privilege. That's what we have allowed the Second Amendment to become, and I think it's it's a societal issue. It's an education issue. You have a lot of people that are terrified of guns. Now maybe not so many in Arkansas, but you do have some. You see somebody sees a gun, and they don't look at it as a tool. They look at it as a death instrument, and that's because we're not around them as much as we used to be. And so you do have to overcome that. Some people, they definitely have irrational fears, and we've just got to, hopefully, with logic and rational thinking, can dispel some of this.
Exactly, and that's what we do with the Patriots Act 746. We're not about pushing people into something they don't like. We're about trying to educate people into something they don't know, because there is a whole generation that's been raised, that's come up, that actually just don't know the Constitution, and we are absolutely 100% Constitution driven. It amazes me, Paul, how people will overlook the Second Amendment, but stand on the top of the house and scream the First Amendment, when actually they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, they want the right to say what they want to say, but they don't want the right for me to carry like I want to carry. And it's a contradiction of terms by all means.
Hey, John, I know we didn't discuss this, but have you been following this 3D gun making process?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, now the news of the day now is you've got these lawsuits from these states that are very anti-Second Amendment, and they think it's going to be some sort of Armageddon, and so the blueprint defense distributors, the blueprint's now been taken down offline because of the lawsuit until they can straighten this out. But you still got, they say thousands of people worldwide have already downloaded the blueprints so they could, 3D print their own guns. And I just think, that is a level of freedom that I find fascinating. If people could be able to construct their own devices to protect themselves, I say more power to them.
Well, my honest opinion on that is, I think this is much ado about nothing. I really think there's a lot. This is probably part of the leftist group trying to make a big stink about something that's really not a big deal at all. Probably the same thing was made 200 years ago when some of the handguns that are made now were coming into production. The material, I don't think that's really a big deal. I haven't yet seen any kind of plastic bullets. Well, I guess we do have Nerf guns, but nevertheless, of course, the extremists jump to, well, they'll be able to hide them better, blah, blah, blah. I just don't see all that. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's a great idea. I personally don't think I can afford anything like this because, from what I'm understanding, 3D machines are exponentially expensive, and so I don't see myself ever being involved in it. But I think it's a cool idea, and it's definitely part of the Second Amendment. Anybody that would stand against this cannot say they are pro 2A.
Yeah, I think
again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what, as the price of 3D printers and the materials go down, is to see what cool inventions people are going to come out with, like cool new ways, the firearms. I think firearms might even be rethought to some extent. You just never know what an American can do in his garage. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. Well, Paul, again, this is exactly where they were how many 100 years ago when they started making repeater firearms. I mean, oh my goodness, you can shoot more than one. That cause all kinds of trouble. And look where we are. It's all good.
So,
I think it's a ploy.
So, John, we talked a little bit about. Now, I want to tell everybody you're a pastor. We talked on the phone yesterday about this, and I thought your story was fascinating. I mean, because you're named after John Calvin. It's John Calvin Martin. So, your parents. I mean, they gave you this name, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct. But there was no correlation at all to the famous John Calvin. Other than, and after we talked, I got to think about this. Other than my mom and dad may have been prophetic and didn't know it.
Yeah.
Because the famous John Calvin was a reformer. He was someone who rebelled against the system, and I have that nature somewhat. So, but now, in all honesty, I think it's a good thing not to necessarily be a rebellious person, but to stand for what's right, even if it comes to the form of rebellion. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 1, when sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And I was preaching a youth camp years ago, and I told them, I said, what you need to do is rebel against wrong. Be a good rebel. So hopefully my name, John Calvin, is I'm following those footsteps instead of a rebel without a cause. I would like to be a rebel with a cause.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. And John, I would just echo. I would say, you said, maybe it was prophetic that your parents named you John Calvin. I say absolutely. I think God knew what your name was before it was your name. So
I do too.
So
I do too, my friend.
That's certainly right up the reformer John Calvin's alley. But hey, I appreciate it, John Calvin Martin. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and good luck with the Southeast Arkansas chapter.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for what you're doing, buddy.
All righty. You have a great day.
Have a great day.
Folks, it's Patriots of Acts 746. Go on Facebook and and search in the Facebook bar, Patriots of Acts 746. Ask to become a member. This group is exploding. They're educating people about the Second Amendment, and you need to be a part of it. We're going to take a break. This is Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Absolutely, and what that's doing is, of course, with the open borders, erasing our borders. We are not a country without our borders, and shredding our Constitution. But all these playing around with laws, and California has done this as well, of course, and Massachusetts, Maryland, and where they are fundamentally undermining the basis for any laws to be obeyed. And that's a very dangerous slope right now. So, we can pick and choose which laws we want to enforce upon the illegal alien. And now we're letting them get away with it. And then now you see what Governor Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, did, given himself issuing an executive order giving himself authority to be able to pardon these ex-cons, so now that they can vote. So he's allowed 35,000 felons to vote now. So
bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Telephone number 870-275-9799. 870-275-9799. Michael Wickline with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette last week wrote about George Hopkins, the executive director of the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System, who has been under scrutiny. He has been under scrutiny because the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System was the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit. And they won the lawsuit. $300 million, $75 million went to legal fees, and $4.1 million of the $75 million went to another law firm as a referral fee for introducing the law firm in the case to the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System. And then their Massachusetts judge started asking questions. Then there were emails talking about complaints about the lack of compensation with this law firm in Texas that did the referral, and then there was a significant amount of money and favors, is what the email said, done. This has gotten a lot of people wondering about this, and it all led to a hearing a couple of weeks ago where George Hopkins, claiming he didn't know about some of this stuff. And then you had Representative Mark Lowry call for the resignation of George Hopkins, or call for him to step down because his performance during the hearing was unsatisfactory, according to State Representative Mark Lowry. He broke that news on this program, and you can go look that interview up if you'd like. The executive director of the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System, though, has now disclosed that four law firms now, which is, I might have missed something, but I thought we were only dealing with two law firms. But maybe in the class action they were law firms helping other law firms. But now we know that there were four law firms that were reimbursed George Hopkins $42,000. They gave him $42,000. They reimbursed him. It's very important that it wasn't a gift, right? That it was a reimbursement. $42,000 of his travel expenses during the past 4 years when he was traveling to meetings on the class action lawsuits. He's now going back to amend his statement of financial interests for 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017. Hopkins, Michael Wickline writes, filed these amendments after Representative Mark Lowry, a Republican from Maumelle, suggested that Hopkins might consider amending his statement of financial interest for 2017 because that report didn't reflect the travel reimbursements according to records requested by two legislative committees looking into the lawsuits. Hopkins, who is an attorney, said he didn't report the reimbursement because of guidance from the system's former internal auditor, George Snyder. Quote, the guidance at that time was that reimbursements required by a governmental contract rather than an honorarium or voluntary payment were not required to be disclosed. I have consistently followed that guidance. I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that. Sorry. Didn't know I couldn't do that. A quote, I do not know whether the travel in question should have been listed on the Statement of Financial Interest, Hopkins said Tuesday in a written statement to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. If it should have been, I accept full responsibility, and any future travel will go through the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System at the cost would be reimbursed to Arkansas Teacher Retirement System by the vendor. So essentially what George Hopkins should have done is, instead of being reimbursed directly $42,000, he should have turned his travel expenses into the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System. They would reimburse him, and then Arkansas Teacher Retirement would be reimbursed by the law firms. See how that was supposed to work? It seems like if you do it that way, there's, I don't know, a little, there's more paper, right? There's more paper trails that way. Wouldn't you agree? I don't know. You just call me suspicious. Label me with a healthy American skepticism. I find it interesting that you have George Hopkins is in the news. Arkansas Teacher Retirement System is in the news. We're not really sure what happened to that $4.1 million once it went to the Texas law firm. What did any of it come back into Arkansas? That is the question. Do we have another kickback situation? And in light of what's going on in the headlines, you should not be upset that we would even ask that question. Of course we should, because there seems to be corruption everywhere, around every nook and cranny of the Marble Palace. What happened to it? So it's very suspicious. People are asking questions, and now you amend your statement of financial interest because you got reimbursed $42,000. Again, there's nothing conclusive. There's no smoking gun here. It's just another development. And I have a feeling that, I don't know, when you actually attend a hearing versus just read about the reporting of the hearing, sometimes the people who are actually in the room can kind of sense if things are tense, if things are relaxed, if you can look at body language and how people are responding and answering to questions and that sort of thing. So Graham Sloan, the director of the Arkansas Ethics Commission, said Wednesday that he would advise officials in similar circumstances to Hopkins. Are there officials in similar circumstances? He needs to disclose the reimbursement of their travel expenses by a non-governmental source, but he stopped short of saying that Hopkins violated state law. As for the guidance cited by Hopkins, meaning, I didn't disclose because I was told I shouldn't disclose, that's the first time I have ever encountered that interpretation. Sloan said, quote, that's the first time I have ever encountered that interpretation. So Graham Sloan, the head of the Arkansas Ethics Commission, says, basically, I don't know why you would conclude that you didn't have to disclose this on your statement of financial interest. I'm not sure why you thought this was the way the law worked. The financial amendments. So he has amended. This is what George Hopkins, the director of the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System, disclosed. In 2014, Radnor, Pennsylvania-based Kessler, Topaz, Meltzer, and Czech LLP law firm paid $4,020 towards Hopkins' expenses for 2 trips to New York and a trip to Los Angeles. The New York-based Labaton Shukaro LLP law firm paid $2,537 towards Hopkins' expenses of 2 trips to New York. In 2015, Labaton Shukaro paid $7,536 for 3 trips to New York, 1 to Boston and 1 to Orange County, California. In 2016, Labaton paid $9,158 towards his expenses for 2 trips to Washington, D.C., 2 to New York, and 1 to Alexandria, Virginia. The New York-based Bernstein, Litowitz, Berger, and Grossman law firm paid $1,048 towards his expenses for a trip to New Orleans. Labaton also spent $293 on breakfast and lunch for 15 to 20 system employees who worked on Memorial Day. In 2017, Labaton paid $11,216 toward his expenses for 4 trips to New York, 2 to Boston, and 1 to Detroit. Bernstein, Litowitz, Berger, and Grossman paid $4,666 toward his expenses for 3 trips to New York and a trip to New Orleans. And New York-based Kaplan, Fox, and Kilshmer LLP paid $2,095 for a trip to New York. All of that has been amended as such. Just thought you should know about this. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
You know, Paul, what are we becoming? We're becoming a lawless nation with chaos and mayhem. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us are standing around going, what has happened to my America? But if we don't, get active, and I encourage every one of your listeners, we've seen what two people, and my husband and myself, have done, and totally just, I can't tell you, we were just moved, Paul, to do this and to keep on. And I'm 100% volunteer. I put my small company on hold. My husband was a professional engineer, certainly not independently wealthy. He made a good living. But now here we are, using our retirement to try to save this country. I cannot have a small business like my parents had if I don't have a country, Paul, and that's what it's coming down to.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of people feel that way, and I appreciate you sacrificing to promote this cause. We're talking with Maria Espinoza. She's the director of the Remembrance Project. You can find out more at theremembranceproject.org. You used the phrase, Maria, earlier, preventable deaths. That's the whole point here. These deaths are preventable if we had an immigration policy that made sense. President Trump tweeted recently, it's in the news, all of the morning headlines, he's willing to shut down the government if he doesn't get funding for the wall. So a couple questions here, Maria. Do you think that a wall is going to help decrease, illegal immigration? Let's just start there.
Absolutely. Walls work. Our doors work. We all lock our doors, our cars. We need a wall, and it would prevent these illegal aliens from easily crossing over. There is no way our agents can control that border right now. I've been along that border. I've been on night watches, watching these illegal aliens with backpacks loaded with drugs coming across, and I was 60 miles north of our border. So absolutely, it's due to the American public. 40 years we've been waiting for this, and these politicians know exactly what they're doing. They don't want that security because they are owned, Paul, by these open borders groups who shell out a lot of money for their reelection campaigns. I say they fill their coffers with this blood money, while American children are filling coffins.
I was reading a story today about the Koch brothers, matter of fact, and how they had they had a conference call with some of their donors, and they were saying that they might support Democrats if the Democrats will oppose the tariffs that President Trump is on, but also they also reported it. Look, we don't want the type of border security. At least that was the Breitbart article I was reading. We want this to continue. Because right now, let's just talk about this, Maria. If we have a decrease in illegal immigration, we're going to have wages rise eventually. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I know individuals who owned small companies. Mom and pop shops, Paul. This is what we're talking about. And they cannot compete with another company that illegally hires these illegal aliens. And because, look, the standard of living is totally different. We live here. These illegal aliens, for now, are 10 men in an apartment. So, yes, they can make, $2 an hour and survive just fine. And they send their money back home. As we know, the dollar is much stronger in Mexico. So our mom and pop shops, like my parents had eventually, are going out of business. And there are no jobs that can sustain Americans if this continues.
So the first question was, do you think a border wall is going to stop illegal immigration? You said yes. What about shutting down the government? What do you think? You think it's time to stare down across the aisle and say, hey, listen, this is what I was elected to do, and you guys need to fund it?
Well, I think they're doing a poor job anyway. They're supposed to be having these budgets, 12 different budgets. No, they're throwing everything in one lump together so that we're forced. They're trying to force the American people to accept this, and we have with this omnibus bill and all that's going on. But take a look. You ask these families whose loved ones are 6 feet under, never to see them again, and all the turmoil that they've had to go through.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. 870-275-9799. That is the telephone number as we start the second hour this morning. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're broadcasting over at facebook.com/Conduit News. So if you've missed anything, that is the largest spider. Oh, my goodness. This spider has just descended. Hang on. I've got to take this thing out. What is this thing? Hang on one second. This is ridiculous. What is that? I know brown recluses are not supposed to have webs, but my goodness. That looked like a brown recluse on a web, though. I've never seen anything like that. Anyway, I think it's dead. I'm sorry about that, guys. It's very unprofessional, but that, I don't know. Those of you saw my reaction when this giant spider descended, and now I am paranoid. All right, sorry, I don't like spiders. What was I talking about? I have no idea what I was talking about. You'll have to excuse me. Okay, all right. So, yeah, we're broadcasting over at facebook.com/Conduit News, but we're also broadcasting over on our YouTube channel. Feel free to go over there. You can comment on the YouTube channel while it's live as well, just like Facebook. And it's Conduit News, and click the notifications button, subscribe, and then click the little bell to receive notifications. Okay. The headline here from John Moritz is that a judge has finally made a decision. Judge has finally made a decision and has said, look, not going to give you a preliminary injunction against issue 1, which is the bad tort reform amendment that we're going to be voting on this November. Now, I say that because I just want everybody to know. You got to tell all your friends, listen, there's a so-called tort reform amendment that's on the ballot, and it's a terrible deal for the people of this state. It's a terrible deal for the most vulnerable or the end of life who are the, late stages in life, nursing home. This is a bill written for special interest, and yet the people promoting it claim that if you pass it, it will end special interest influence. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So a judge, though, has rejected the injunction, which means this is going to continue up. Eventually, it's going to make it to the Supreme Court. There's no doubt about it. It was a 2-page order. Moritz writes, Pulaski County Judge Mackie Pierce ruled that his court has jurisdiction over the suit against Secretary of State Mark Martin, who certified the placement of issue 1 on the ballot, but that no irreparable harm will occur if an immediate injunction against that certification is denied. So, anyway, that moves forward, and we'll be following that story as it develops. It's very important to understand how special interest operates freely. They operate by paying off legislators. And we now know this. It's in the headlines. They also pay off judges, as one judge is in jail for pleading guilty to accepting a bribe to lower a judgment that came down against a nursing home. He lowered the judgment for $10,000. Yeah, it's pretty cheap. Well, now he's in jail. Now, I don't know who the briber was. I mean, we know, but nothing else has happened with that case. Only in Arkansas do you have something so public, and yet the legislators still go ahead and vote for a bill that becomes a referral. It gets placed on the ballot in a tort reform effort that's written specifically for the nursing home industry. It's unbelievable. Not to mention, as I will reference my earlier point, I've seen what happens down at the Marble Palace, and if you don't think that giving, which is what issue 1 does, it gives the legislature the authority to write the rules of evidence for specific cases, I don't want those people doing that. That is maddening. It's terrifying. Because I've seen what they do. You've seen what they do. You know what? There's a ton of stuff they've done I haven't seen. They go on that rules committee, they go in the special language committee. That's where the real carefully crafted wording goes into these bills. If you don't think they'll slip something in there saying, yeah, you know what? This nursing home owner that's being sued for neglecting a patient, you know what? We don't think they should consider the testimony of, well, I'll give you an example. I mean, let's say something happens to somebody in a nursing home or in a care facility, and it's pretty egregious. Let's say they don't turn the patient over and they develop these bed sores. Nobody does anything about them. Let's say your feet are all black and blue, and it's just the worst case. Let's say you get photos. Let's say that when the family realizes what's gone on, they even call in somebody from the Department of Health, and the Department of Health writes up something and says this was a clear violation. Well, then, you got this big lawsuit going on, and let's just say, I don't know, somebody in the legislature says, you know what, I think we need to write rules of evidence for that case, that Department of Health memo was hearsay. Well, it's now into the law, and we're now writing rules of evidence for this particular case. If you don't think that kind of stuff's going to go on, and these people have the nerve to say this is going to get rid of special interest, I think you guys are projecting a little bit. You guys are huge fans of special interests, and when it comes to I don't know, well, I mean, look at the Marble Palace. The whole place down there has been bought by the Medicaid mafia, and we're just now figuring all this out. Okay, so we will be following that story. There's a new article over at conduitforaction.org. It's very good. I've seen stuff on this before. It has to do with the rainy day fund. I would reference a great article CFA did previously, the differences between the rainy day fund and the long-term reserve fund and how they just kind of swapped the names. Really deceitful stuff. Headline, Legislature abdicates its budget responsibility. State government spending is out of whack. Major spending decisions are bypassing the legislature and are being made by the Governor Asa Hutchinson with the approval of just one legislative committee. Now, I'll tell you what this is getting at. This is essentially getting at the fact that the way the Arkansas Legislative Council, which is not the full General Assembly, the way they approve and rubber stamp the spending habits of Governor Asa Hutchinson, the speculation is that this in no way meets the constitutional requirement that rests with the legislature to approve the spending of money, to approve how we spend money. I mean, the legislature, the Constitution is very specific here in Arkansas. There's a reason when you go into the fiscal session, you have to have 3/4. You have to have 3/4 of each chamber approve spending of money. This is fantastic. The people who crafted the Arkansas Constitution wanted to make sure, obviously, that if the government was going to spend money on something and increase its responsibility or its role in this, trying to solve this problem or that problem, that 3/4 of the people's representatives had to give and grant the authority to do so. That's fantastic. Like, getting 3/4 vote to spend money on roads, easy. We all agree on that. Getting 3/4 vote to support President Obama's socialist Medicaid expansion, that's been very difficult. And the only way they even did that is with a unconstitutional line item veto scheme, which I don't want to rehash right now, but you can look into that. The point is, you're supposed to have 3/4. Is that being done when the Legislative Council just rubber stamps what Asa Hutchinson wants to do or what any governor wants to do? So what's the situation? The Rainy Day Fund. Governor Hutchinson wants to give $21.9 million from a state rainy day fund to Arkansas Department of Transportation to use as matching funds to obtain federal highway money. Well, maybe this means that the governor's abandoned his call for a gas tax increase. Forget for the moment whether you are for or against spending more state money on highways. This commentary goes on. The question is whether so much spending discretion should be in the hands of the governor instead of the legislature deciding by law what specific items should be funded through an appropriation bill. How much is this really? Let's put the expenditure, this $21.9 million, in perspective by comparing the $21.9 million in discretionary funds to other allocations made earlier this year by the law. By law. You had the Municipal Aid Fund, $29 million. You have this rainy day suggestion of $21.9. Then you have the County Aid Fund, $21 million. Parks and Tourism Fund account, $20 million. County Jail Reimbursement Fund, $18 million. Arkansas Agricultural Department Fund account, $17 million. Child Support Enforcement Fund, $12 million. Crime Information System Fund, $3.7 million. Now, the reason this is a really good comparison here, and Conduit for Action is essentially pointing out that Governor Asa Hutchinson is asking the Arkansas Legislative Council to approve a sum of money that is the equivalent of entire departments. And when we approve that amount of money, like for the Municipal Aid Fund, when we approve $29 million, it's not approved, it's voted on because it's the law. It's been done in an appropriations bill. It's gone through the budgeting process. This $21.9 million in a rainy day item, the suggestion is he's wanting to spend this, but it's not specifically allocated in the law. He's just going to the council, and he's asking for a rubber stamp on how to spend it. The argument is this doesn't jive with the Arkansas Constitution. And case in point, the governor has asked the committee, Legislative Council, to approve transferring $21.9 million from a rainy day fund to the Department of Transportation. Approval by a mere committee is a far cry from how normal budget decisions must be made. As envisioned by the Constitution, how much to spend and for what must be passed by an appropriation law approved by 3/4 majority vote of the House and 3/4 majority vote of the Senate. And even after the appropriation law is passed, the revenue stabilization law is then revised to determine how much of each appropriation will be distributed to each fund. How is the governor able to bypass this legislative process? How is this governor or any governor able to bypass this legislative process? The legislature has abdicated its constitutional authority by transferring huge amounts of money into a rainy day fund and then authorizing the governor to pick and choose what he wants to spend it on and how much, as long as just a committee approves it. A committee, not the full body, a committee. And, they don't even record their votes. Listen to this. In no way can you equate one legislative committee's rubber stamp of the governor's decision with the approval requirement for appropriation bills under the Constitution. One committee approves what the governor wants versus 3/4 of each chamber. That is getting around, bypassing the Constitution. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to bypass the Constitution? Was this an unforeseen emergency? No. The Highway Commission has been whining for years about wanting more money. This isn't an emergency. In 2017, Governor Hutchinson pushed for more money for highways by supporting a bond issue and a new tax on gasoline and diesel. The legislature rejected the plan. The governor announced his support for an effort to gather voter signatures to put on the ballot the question of passing the bonds and taxes by an act initiated by the people. That effort died, but we expect the governor to try again to pass the bond issue with taxes supporting it. The legislature meets every year and just met a few months ago. The new annual budget was passed in March of this year and only went into effect on July 1st, just a month ago. The legislature meets again in less than 6 months. There is no good reason for the legislature to allow such an expenditure outside of the appropriation process. It's not an emergency. What's the real reason? One of the statistics that the press keeps up with is how much of a spending increase there is in the state's general revenue fund. So we are seeing more and more money transferred to other funds and then spent with little notice from the press. Looking only at the general revenue fund makes the spending increase look lower, as reported by the press. With the press being so easily distracted by the general revenue fund numbers, it's no wonder politicians want more and more spending done outside of the fund so their spending doesn't sound as bad, even if it means abdicating responsibility over spending from discretionary or rainy day funds, meaning the press isn't going to report the spending increase like they would if you did it in the new normal process. So, here's the conclusion. If the legislature is going to keep abdicating its responsibility by transferring huge amounts of money to a discretionary fund for the governor, why do we even need the legislature? If this strategy can pass constitutional scrutiny, then what prevents all funds from being automatically transferred to a rainy day fund and therefore bypassing the legislature for all budget decisions? They could just stay home, let the governor decide everything. But if they stayed home, they would miss out on some on some swell meals and booze provided by lobbyists. In 2015, the legislature claimed it needed a huge salary increase because it's a full-time legislature. They got the salary increase of 148%. They have gotten even higher salaries since 2015. With the legislature allowing more and more discretionary spending by the governor, legislators should refund the salary increases to taxpayers. The concept here is that they're not doing their jobs. They have been invested with the power of the purse, and the governor has not been invested with that power. The Arkansas General Assembly needs to take back their constitutional authority. Will it happen anytime soon? I'm skeptical. And mainly because of close-knit ties in family relations. Back in just a moment. What about shutting down the government? What do you think? You think it's time to stare down across the aisle and say, hey, listen, this is what I was elected to do, and you guys need to fund it?
Well, I think they're doing a poor job anyway. They're supposed to be having these budgets, 12 different budgets. No, they're throwing everything in one lump together so that we're forced, they're trying to force the American people to accept this, and we have with this omnibus bill and all that's going on. But take a look. You ask these families whose loved ones are 6 feet under, never to see them again, and all the turmoil that they've had to go through, where they're not getting calls. They want to know why this illegal alien who was 4 or 5, even 10 times deported or spent time in jail and was released and remained in our country to have access to their loved one. Mm-hmm. You ask them, what's it worth to you? I say yes, shut down the government. That is because we've had it.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal.
Ethics.
Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, get ready, Arkansas. The Satanic Temple is coming to Arkansas to protest the Ten Commandments monument. The Satanic Temple plans to bring their Baphomet statue, this half man, half goat. Typically in illustrations, it's also half woman, but it's a disgusting photo of children looking up at this statue of Baphomet with a goat head. Anyway, this weird half animal, half bird, half man. Also, you have... on the actual statue, they did leave the phallus with the serpents around it. It's very clear. This is an occult image. Okay, that's fine. The Satanic Temple says it will bring its 7.5-foot bronze Baphomet statue to the state capitol in Little Rock as part of a protest next month to defend religious freedom. August 16th. They have this rally planned. It is intended to bring together religious leaders of different faiths to discuss the importance of the First Amendment and its protection for religious pluralism, the group said in a news release. Quote, freedom of religion means that the government must not be allowed to endorse one reason over another. No, it does not. No. Your religious freedom would be violated if people told you you had to believe or conform to a religious standard. That's not happening. Congress has not made a law establishing a religion, saying you must adhere to this. There hasn't been a Babylon moment with, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There hasn't been that moment in American history. This is going to be very interesting to see what happens on August 16th. And what's interesting here is I couldn't help but make this connection. The Ten Commandments statue was sponsored, the bill that became law was sponsored by Senator Jason Rapert. And Senator Jason Rapert is known to play the fiddle. And there's that song, The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Not The Devil Went Down to Arkansas, but maybe we should amend it. I don't know. I couldn't help but make the connection. Come on. Give me some credit here. Back in a moment.
Can't hold us, threaten us any longer as we're watching our country be ruined. I would rather them just go home and have them work on enforcing existing laws. We don't need any new ones where they're creating loopholes, Paul, to be able to get those funding from the open borders groups. And those open borders groups, they're owned by people who are pretty well off, and they're not living where we live.
You mentioned at the beginning of the interview, Maria, that you got started, you and your husband, by trying to fight the sanctuary policies of Houston, Texas. Now, for all of our listeners across the state of Arkansas, that may be a little surprising to us because we kind of look at Texas a little differently. But I do know Houston, the city of Houston, has some strange policies. I remember a story a long time ago about how they made it illegal to feed the homeless, I think, off the top of my head. But so tell us, though, is Houston still a sanctuary city, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. However, because, and this happened in the last few years, because they cooperate with the federal government on other matters, they do not consider themselves a sanctuary city. So, for me, either you enforce and collaborate with the federal government on every aspect, or you don't. And they can't, again, pick and choose which laws that they want to enforce and abide by. And unfortunately, that these elected officials have immunity when it comes to being held accountable should there be a casualty because of their policies. That's very unfortunate, but I think that, and it's been tried and trying to go after these individuals, and there's a discretionary function, qualified immunity. And I think that what these sanctuary city mayors and governors are doing, especially with the sanctuary city policies, I feel that their qualified immunity should not apply. So I think that they should be held accountable and prosecuted. There are very stiff laws in the code.
Yeah, and that may be what President Trump and the executive branch have to do before it's all said and done. And it's reminiscent of when President Reagan had a standoff with the air traffic controllers who went on strike, and eventually he just had to say, okay, you're gone, I'll bring in the military and they'll do your job. And, you just got fired. And there are people that, I've talked to people that are my age whose parents were, they were air traffic controllers and then they lost their job. That it may be a similar situation, but even higher stakes when Donald Trump eventually is going to have to deal with cities here who are just blatantly ignoring and enabling these preventable deaths that the Remembrance Project is all about. And Maria, I'll give you the last word.
Okay, and there are
determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. All right, so we're going to go to the phones now. I want to introduce you to Mr. Mike Landry. Mike is on the phone line. Mike, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Great. Now, Mike, you are you're from Washington County. You're a committee man from Washington County in the Republican Party there. Tell us about that position, first of all.
Okay, I just recently was elected as state committee man for the Washington County Republican Committee. I've served 6 years as the district committee man, and I really wanted to get involved at the state level. And one of the things I have really been concerned about is the platform of the Republican Party. And one way to have more voice in that is to be operating in the Republican Party at the state level.
I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. So I have this headline here back on July 26th, headline over at conduitforaction.org. Thank you, Arkansas GOP, for putting the principles back in the platform. Now, Mike, I'd love to know what you know about this incident. Now, I think it really did gain traction. I think there's a lot of people that didn't know that there were certain principles that were removed from the platform and I understand that they've now been put back in. What can you tell us about what transpired?
Okay, one of the things that I have been very enthused about over the years has been the Republican Party platform, because I thought it's a very good conservative platform. And I had not paid really close attention. In fact, this is really kind of besmirching myself and other members of our committee. We did not catch the fact that there were some pretty big changes made in the platform in 2016. And I appreciate Conduit for Action for calling attention to that. And so I volunteered to be involved at our Washington County level of expressing our recommendations for any platform changes. And one of the things that we initiated, it was my wife actually, who really said, we've got to get that initial language back into the platform from 2016. So we made a recommendation to put some principles. They had been in the preamble of the platform, but they had been taken out and softer language was put into the preamble. But the real principles we were interested in, the party principles prior to 2016, they were only on the website. We wanted them back in the platform. And some of these principles include power of faith in God, sanctity of life, individual responsibility and initiative, individual freedom and liberty, secured by a limited government, private property, lower taxes to produce economic growth, strong national defense, the personal right to own and bear arms, the equal and just enforcement of the law, separate and equal branches of government. Those were the party principles that had been taken out. Well, I am happy to say that those principles were put back in, and we made recommendations for restoration of language of those principles, and the new preamble of the Republican Party of Arkansas, the language they use is even stronger than what we had before, and stronger than what we at Washington County recommended.
And that's good.
So we're very gratified by that.
Yeah, that's good that you swing the pendulum back and you go even further, to kind of reassert what you mean. Now, I don't know if you have the answer because I still don't know exactly why. But during this process, did we ever figure out why somebody made the change in the first place? Like why did we feel the need to get rid of these principles, these bullet points that make it really easy for average Republican or somebody who's not a Republican to go and figure out what somebody who claims to be a Republican is supposed to stand for? Why did they get removed in the first place? Do you know?
I don't know. I wasn't part of that process, and like I say, we weren't paying attention. I appreciate Conduit for pointing that out to us. We just were not paying attention to that, and it got pulled out of the platform. And I'm very appreciative of the members of the platform committee from the 3rd Congressional District, Leon Castor in Benton County, Octavio Sanchez in Benton County, and Janelle Fulmer, who is our state committee woman. I appreciate them for working to get that language back in. I especially want to commend Leon Castor. There was a situation back in 2010 where we were at the Republican convention, I think in Hot Springs at the time, and Leon Castor brought the whole thing to a halt. He did not like the language that was in the platform, and so he put forth a motion that carried that the entire convention was going to go through the platform line by line. It took all afternoon, but we did it. So Leon has been a real hawk about this sort of thing.
Wow.
And I have been in communication with Leon about attempting to make these revisions. But how this got by to begin with, I don't know. I will say one of the things, Paul, there are people in the Republican Party. My wife and I got involved after getting active with the Tea Party in 2009, and we got involved in local Republican politics. And we were told by a former officer in the Republican Party that, the platform doesn't mean anything. it's a joke. Well, we don't believe that. And one of the things I think of this Conduit has come up with the term platform Republicans. Mm-hmm. And this is the lodestar. This is the guiding light that we need to go by to define what it is to be a Republican. So the language in the platform is very important. And I'm glad that whatever happened a few years ago in 2016, I'm glad that has been rectified.
Yeah, me too. I really am, because it is important. Honestly, it's important when some of these Republicans, get into session and they are being approached by, everybody under the sun, and a lot of times they're being asked to not conform to the platform that they ran on.
Right.
And in a way, the platform is a contract with the voters. And many people are willing to embrace that platform during campaign season, but then come back with excuses as to why we can't adhere to these principles later. And so, it apparently, is kind of, it's a way to keep our elected officials accountable, hold them accountable, and that's why I think the platform is so important. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I understand the pressures that people get in when they're in the legislature, the governor's office, any office. I mean, people come and bring what seem to be reasonable pleas or reasonable ideas, but they go contrary to what we are supposed to be as Republicans. And like I say, we got involved in the Republican Party not because we go along with everything that the party believes or with what all Republicans believe. But the fact of the matter is the system is rigged for two parties. And if you're going to be a player, you got to step up and get involved in the organization that's doing the work. Well, it is important to maintain integrity within that organization, and I think the platform is an objective way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so we're talking with Mike Landry. He's a state committee man from Washington County, the Republican Party there. Well, I appreciate your take on this, Mike. Can you give us a little information, a little insight as to what are you going to do, as a state committee man? What are some of your responsibilities, when you go down and you meet with other Republicans?
Well, I'm just learning the ropes in terms of how that's done. But it is my desire. I would like to be on the platform committee. If not, I know our chair, Jim Estes, would like to be on it, and that would be fine with me as long as there are people like that who have very strong conservative principles providing input. But that's something I would like to be involved in.
Yeah. Mike Landry, I appreciate it, sir. You have a great day, and thank you for starting the beginning of your day with us here. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. You too.
All righty. Folks, that's Mike Landry. We'll have a copy of this interview up on YouTube separately here within the day. And when we come back, I know this is very interesting, but do you know that the government regulates midwives? Did you know this? The state of Arkansas, whether or not you have a midwife, whether or not the government says that you can give birth at home if you choose to, if you want to. We'll give you that story when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world.
These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
The other crimes too, Paul. Really quick, for instance, over 600,000 crimes were committed against Texans alone. So there's many other crimes that this is attached to. But I want to thank you and keep up the good work, Paul. Continue spreading the word. And I ask for your listeners to go to our website, theremembranceproject.org, sign up for emails. And if you can afford anything, just please make a donation. We're going to come create more Stone Life quilt banners and send those out to all over the United States. So
all
we
right.
need help.
Maria Espinoza, I appreciate it so much. It's great to meet you. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, Paul. God bless you.
All righty.
Keep praying for our president and our country.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Maria Espinoza, everybody, the director of the Remembrance Project. Go there now, theremembranceproject.org, theremembranceproject.org. Check them out, and we're going to take a break. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection, the fragrance of backroom deals, nepotism, the aroma of higher taxes, subliminal deception, deep state, made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. I want to thank our guest today, John Calvin Martin, It was great to have him on. It's also great to have Mr. Michael Landry on, you just heard. This broadcast is available over at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/conduitnews, and the YouTube page. I keep saying this, but Facebook's stock is tanking, and there's just, I don't know, whoever thought after the Cambridge Analytica scandal that the mainstream media, they first reported it as an anti-Trump story, but then eventually it wound up, Mark Zuckerberg was before a congressional hearing. Some people say he lied. I just want everybody to know who listens to this program on Facebook that if for some reason it ever got vastly unpopular to use Facebook, if Facebook decided to become the next MySpace, we're over at YouTube, Conduit News. Just go subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. Just I don't know, just kind of in case. Phone number 870-275-9799. Midwives. There is this phrase that we use in conservative circles when we criticize government. One of the things we say is that, these socialists or these communists, they want to take care of us from cradle to grave. Hey, you know the difference between a communist and a calmunist? There's really no difference. It's just the communist uses, tries to calm everybody down, distract them, so you don't really know it's communism. It's something else. Did you know this?
No, I didn't know.
Calmunist. I'm a calmunist. I mean, I'm not, but that's what somebody would say who is trying to deceive you.
I ran across a political cartoon this morning. It was really funny to me. It was a stage, so it was like a nice stage with a podium on it. It said the Democratic National Convention behind it, and there were two donkeys. They were anthropomorphic, so they were like humans, but they had donkey heads and stuff. And they were dropping a banner down the front of the stage, and they were saying, "Hurry up, cover it up before they get here." And it said communism under it with a sickle and everything, and and they were covering up with the word Democrats.
Well, they're getting to the point where with this, a Casio or a Ocasio-Cortez or whatever, she is out in the open now, which is why we talked about this during the Carefully Crafted Language segment yesterday. That's why the socialist comedian Louis Black says we don't need to embrace Democrats, socialists like Ocasio-Cortez because it's too far. We need to come back to the middle and then slowly get what we want. I mean, he is exactly telling. There's a reason that over across the pond, the Fabian Socialists originally, when they were founded, their logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's how this whole thing operates. Anyway, the phrase cradle to grave, obviously cradle refers to infants. And so when I didn't realize this, but the state of Arkansas regulates midwives. Who knew? Oh, yeah. The licensing board parody would have been better than the essence. This from Andy Davis, that the State Board of Health on Thursday, July 28th, this article was written on the 28th, rejected proposed rule changes preventing the Department of Health from doing exams on women as part of its assessments on whether they can safely give birth at home. Well, what a novel. Really? The changes proposed by attorney Kesha Chiapinelli of Bentonville on behalf of 4 women who have given birth at home also would have allowed licensed lay midwives to deliver babies for women who have previously had cesarean sections. So, as I read this article, what I have, it also deduces that doctors don't want you to have an at-home birth if you have had a previous cesarean section. They say it increases the risk of potential uteral ruptures, things like that. This is the business of government, by the way, where they rejected the proposed rules, but who proposes these? Who in their right mind is going to propose rules that women have to submit to an exam by the government if they want to have a baby where they want to have a baby? And I only say this is because I'm a new father. I guess, I mean, it's not quite new. I mean, I'm a first-time father. I'm a year into it. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. We thought about an at-home birth. There's a lot of people that are thinking about them these days. We decided against it. We did our research, right? We looked into it. Even, I don't know if we actually ever had a meeting with a midwife, or another word for it is a doula. I don't think we actually did that, but we got real close to it, and then we decided, you know what? let's go the hospital route. Why not? And everything worked out fine. Actually, that's a whole nother story that is not for radio. But I guess, what business is it of the government for you as a natural human being to decide how you want to bring your child into the world? I mean, come on. We're really going to sit here and say, well, people have always had to have the current healthcare infrastructure the way it is now has always been, and women have always. And listen, I know back in the old, in the olden days, death during pregnancy was a very high factor when it came to women deaths, that sort of thing. But the concept of freedom of choice here is obvious, right? Why are we afraid to let people make choices? All of a sudden, it's my body and I can do what I want to with it. That's thrown out that whole argument is thrown out the window. So, under the current rules, an exam. Now, I want to be clear. This exam is a vaginal exam. That was that was what the proposed rule was that was rejected here. So, under this exam, right now, it's not required, according to Andy Davis, under the current rules. But it's part of the department's assessments to determine whether the mother has any medical conditions making a at-home birth dangerous or require consultation with a doctor. The rules require, currently, clients to receive 2 such assessments, one shortly after the midwife begins providing care, and the other at or near the 36th week of pregnancy. Again, this is the government's business. For me to even say that as a freedom-loving American, it's just frustrating. Individual initiative. But not to mention a lot of people who want to do who choose to do at-home births. It's not an emergency, but who choose to do at-home births. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that they're affluent people who do the research, just like me and my wife did, and we decided against it, but we were still doing our own research. It's our child, for goodness sake. Don't you think we are, can we not trust people in this instance with something that is a very specific, it's a very specific niche. There's way more people giving birth in hospitals than there are at home. A lot of people want to do it to avoid the ridiculous insurance costs or the medical bills. But right now, women who refuse the exam receive an incomplete assessment. Under the rule changes that took effect June 1st, the department has allowed midwives to deliver babies for women who receive such incomplete assessments as long as the midwife has a certification requiring extra training on emergency care. The attorney, Chia Pinelli, said that this still limits options for women whose midwives don't have the additional certification. The health department also has too much leeway in deciding what the risk assessments entail. Quote, the attorney says, our position is the rules are the law, and we want to be able to read the law and know what to expect. You're asking too much. You're asking too much to know what to know what to expect in the law. Nowhere in the rules are the words, I said I was only going to say it once in this segment. Nowhere in the rules are the actual words vaginal exam. Anyway, I said it twice. All right, so here's the thing. This is a women's right. It's their own. This is ridiculous. But the government wants to regulate everything, don't they? They want to regulate everything. I think so. At some point, it just becomes they just don't trust you to make decisions for yourself. Like, They just don't trust you. Let me know what you think. Did you know midwives are regulated? I mean, I didn't know any of this. In such a way, you got to have an exam in order to be given an at-home birth. Ugh.